I stood in the boardroom staring at the man I once called my husband. He had no idea I was about to destroy his life the way he destroyed mine. This wasn't just revenge. It was justice. And it all started with a single text message I wasn't supposed to see. Life had been perfect, or so I thought. For 10 years, I had been the supportive wife, standing by my husband's side as he climbed the corporate ladder. He was the CEO of a successful company, and I was proud of him. Or at least I thought I was. Our home was a reflection of the life we had built together. The living room was filled with photos of us smiling, traveling, and celebrating milestones. The smell of fresh coffee often lingered in the air, a reminder of our quiet mornings together. But lately, something felt off. I noticed the little things first. The late-night calls he took in his study, the way he would quickly silence his phone when I walked into the room. There were nights when he came home smelling like someone else's perfume, but he always had an excuse. It was a client meeting, he would say, or I had to work late with the team. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust him. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The office was another world, a place where he seemed to shine. I had visited a few times, always greeted by the hum of keyboards and the faint scent of printer ink. His secretary was always there, smiling politely, offering coffee, and organizing his schedule. She was young, ambitious, and always dressed impeccably. I never thought much of her until that day. It was a Tuesday morning. I was making coffee in our sunlit kitchen, the sound of birds chirping outside filling the air. His phone buzzed on the counter, and I glanced at the screen. It was a message from her. My heart stopped as I read the words. They were flirty, intimate, and confirmed my worst fears. My hands trembled as I put the phone down, the reality sinking in. He was having an affair. With her. But as I turned the corner, I saw her, his secretary, standing in the doorway, and everything changed. The day I found out about the affair started like any other. I woke up early, made coffee, and scrolled through my emails while the sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows. My husband Mark was already gone, off to another important meeting, or so he said. I didn't think much of it at the time. He had been working late a lot lately, and I had grown used to his excuses. But that morning, something felt different. Maybe it was the way he had avoided my eyes when he kissed me goodbye, or the way he had rushed out the door without saying much. Whatever it was, it left a knot in my stomach that I couldn't shake. I decided to distract myself by cleaning the house. As I dusted the shelves in his study, I noticed his phone sitting on the desk. It buzzed, and the screen lit up with a notification. I didn't mean to look, but the name caught my eye. Emily, his secretary. My heart skipped a beat as I picked up the phone and read the message. It was short, but the words hit me like a punch to the gut. Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again. My hands trembled as I scrolled through their messages, each one more damning than the last. They weren't just having an affair. They were in love. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. How long had this been going on? How could he do this to me? I thought about all the times he had come home late, all the times he had brushed me off when I asked him how his day was. It all made sense now. He hadn't been working late, he had been with her. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, to cry, to confront him right then and there. But instead, I sat there in silence, staring at the phone in my hands. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall seemed louder than ever, each second stretching into an eternity. I felt numb, like I was trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When Mark came home that evening, I was waiting for him in the living room. He walked in, his tie loosened and his hair slightly messy, and gave me a tired smile. "Hey, babe," he said, as if nothing was wrong. I didn't smile back. I just held up his phone and said, "Who's Emily?" His face went pale. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me like a deer caught in headlights. Then he sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I didn't want you to find out like this," he said, his voice calm but distant. "But yes, I've been seeing Emily. It's been going on for a while now." His words cut deeper than any knife. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like the walls were closing in around me. "How could you do this to me?" I asked, my voice shaking. "After everything we've been through?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, his expression blank, as if he didn't even care. And that hurt more than anything. The man I had loved for 10 years, the man I had built a life with, was looking at me like I was a stranger. The next few days were a blur. I told my best friend Sarah what had happened. She was furious. "I always knew there was something off about him," she said, pacing back and forth in my living room. "But I never thought he'd do something like this." "What are you going to do?" I didn't know. Part of me wanted to leave, to pack my bags and never look back. But another part of me wanted to fight, to make him pay for what he had done. I thought about all the sacrifices I had made for him, the late nights I had spent alone, the dreams I had put on hold to support his career. I wasn't going to let him get away with this, not after everything I had given up for him. I started digging deeper, trying to find out more about Emily. She was young, ambitious, and beautiful. Everything I wasn't. She had been working as Mark's secretary for about a year, and from what I could tell, their affair had started shortly after she was hired. I felt sick to my stomach as I pieced together the timeline. How many times had I been in the same room as her, completely unaware of what was going on right under my nose? But the more I learned, the angrier I became. This wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the betrayal, the way he had made me feel like I wasn't enough. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. I was going to make him regret ever crossing me. I thought I understood him. I thought I knew him better than anyone. But the truth, well, that was something I had never expected. And it was too late to back out now. The days after I discovered Mark's affair were a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, sadness, betrayal. They all swirled inside me like a storm I couldn't escape. But as the initial shock began to fade, something else took its place: determination. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed, but I knew I couldn't act impulsively. If I wanted to make him pay, I needed a plan. I started by gathering evidence. I needed proof, not just of his affair, but of everything he had done to hurt me. I began by going through his phone when he wasn't looking, taking screenshots of his messages with Emily. They were damning, filled with declarations of love and plans for a future together. It hurt to read them, but I forced myself to keep going. Every message, every photo, every detail. I saved it all. But the affair was only part of the story. I had a feeling there was more to this, something deeper. Mark had always been ambitious, but lately, he had become secretive about his work. He would lock himself in his study for hours, talking in hushed tones on the phone. I had assumed it was just stress, but now I wasn't so sure. I decided to dig deeper. I reached out to an old friend, Lisa, who worked in the finance department at Mark's company. We met for coffee one afternoon and I told her everything. She was shocked, but sympathetic. "I always thought there was something off about him," she said, stirring her latte. "But I never imagined he'd do something like this. What do you need from me?" I asked her to look into the company's finances. I wanted to know if Mark had been hiding anything, embezzlement, fraud, anything that could bring him down. Lisa agreed to help, but she warned me it wouldn't be easy. "If he's been stealing from the company, he's probably covered his tracks well," she said, "but I'll see what I can find." While Lisa worked on the financial side, I focused on Emily. I needed to know more about her, who she was, what she wanted, and how far she was willing to go. I created a fake social media account and started following her. Her posts were filled with glamorous photos of her at fancy restaurants, expensive vacations, and high-end events. It was clear she was living a life far beyond what a secretary's salary could afford. And then I saw it. A photo of her wearing a diamond necklace I recognized. It was the same one Mark had given me for our anniversary, claiming it was one of a kind. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. He hadn't just been cheating on me, he had been stealing from me too. The necklace, the late nights, the secretive behavior, it all made sense now. He had been using company funds to shower Emily with gifts, all while pretending to be the perfect husband. The betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. But as much as I wanted to confront him, I knew I had to be patient. I needed more evidence, more proof. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything I found. Dates, times, names. I wrote it all down. It became my lifeline, a way to channel my anger into something productive. But it wasn't easy. There were nights when I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was doing the right thing. Was revenge really the answer? Or was I just hurting myself more? I confided in Sarah, who had been my rock through all of this. "You're not crazy for wanting to fight back," she said, her voice firm. "He hurt you, and he deserves to face the consequences. But you need to be careful. Don't let this consume you." Her words stayed with me as I continued to build my case. I hired a private investigator to dig deeper into Mark's activities. What he found shocked me even more. Not only had Mark been embezzling company funds, but he had also been funneling money into offshore accounts. He had been planning this for years, carefully covering his tracks to avoid detection. The man I had married, the man I had trusted, was a fraud in every sense of the word. The more I learned, the angrier I became. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't just about the affair anymore. It was about justice, about holding him accountable for everything he had done. I wasn't just going to expose his affair. I was going to destroy the life he had built on lies. But I knew I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, people who could help me bring him down. I reached out to a few of Mark's colleagues, people I knew had been suspicious of him for years. They were hesitant at first, afraid of the repercussions, but when I showed them the evidence I had gathered, they agreed to help. Together, we started building a case against him, one that would leave him with no way out. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I felt a sense of determination I hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my power, my life, and my future. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let him walk away unscathed. This was my fight, and I was ready to see it through to the end. The more I learned, the deeper the betrayal went. And as the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, I realized one thing. I wasn't just after revenge anymore. I was after something bigger. The private investigator's email came late one night, long after I should have been asleep. I had been staring at my laptop for hours, going over the evidence I had gathered so far, when the notification popped up. My heart raced as I opened it, my eyes scanning the words on the screen. What I read made my blood run cold. Mark hadn't just been stealing from the company. He had been stealing from me. The investigator had uncovered a series of transactions linking Mark's offshore accounts to a shell company he had set up in my name. He had been using my identity to funnel money out of the company, leaving me vulnerable to legal repercussions, if anyone found out. The betrayal was deeper than I had ever imagined. I felt sick to my stomach as I read through the documents. How could he do this to me? How could he risk my future, my freedom, just to fund his affair and his lavish lifestyle? I thought about all the times he had told me he loved me, all the times he had promised to protect me. It was all a lie. Every word, every gesture had been part of his carefully constructed facade. I called Lisa the next morning, my hands still shaking as I held the phone. "You need to see this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She came over immediately, her face pale as she read through the documents. "This is bad," she said, her voice tight with anger. "If anyone finds out about this, you could be held responsible. We need to act fast." We spent the rest of the day going over the evidence, piecing together the timeline of Mark's crimes. It was clear he had been planning this for years, carefully covering his tracks to avoid detection. But he had made one mistake. He had underestimated me. He had assumed I would never find out, that I would never fight back. But he was wrong. I sat there, surrounded by stacks of papers and printouts. I felt a surge of determination. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. If I didn't expose Mark, if I didn't clear my name, I could lose everything. My home, my reputation, my freedom, it was all at stake. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized how complicated this had become. Exposing Mark meant exposing myself. It meant revealing the truth about what he had done and the role I had unknowingly played in his schemes. I would have to face the consequences, no matter how painful they were. I thought about walking away, about cutting my losses and starting over. But I knew I couldn't. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about justice, about holding Mark accountable for everything he had done. I wasn't going to let him win. I wasn't going to let him destroy me. Everything I thought I knew about my plan, about the people around me, was a lie. And I had no idea how far I would have to go now to make them pay. The days leading up to the board meeting were a blur of preparation and anxiety. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, building my case, and rallying allies. Now it was time to put everything into motion. I knew this was my only chance to expose Mark and clear my name, and I wasn't going to let anything go wrong. I started by reaching out to the board members individually. I needed to make sure they would be present for the meeting, and more importantly, that they would listen to what I had to say. It wasn't easy. Some of them were skeptical, others outright hostile. But when I showed them the evidence, the financial records, the offshore accounts, the messages between Mark and Emily, they couldn't ignore it. One by one, they agreed to attend. Next, I focused on Mark. I needed to make sure he would be there, that he wouldn't suspect anything until it was too late. I sent him a carefully worded email inviting him to the meeting under the guise of discussing a new business opportunity. He responded almost immediately, his tone confident and dismissive. "Looking forward to it," he wrote, as if he had nothing to fear. Little did he know his world was about to come crashing down. Emily was trickier. She had been avoiding me ever since I discovered the affair, and I knew she would be suspicious if I reached out directly. Instead, I had Lisa invite her to the meeting, claiming it was a routine update on company finances. Emily agreed, but I could tell she was uneasy. She had always been good at reading people, and I knew she could sense something was off. But she didn't back out. Her arrogance, her belief that she was untouchable, would be her downfall. As the day of the meeting approached, I found myself growing more and more anxious. I spent hours rehearsing what I would say, going over the evidence again and again to make sure I hadn't missed anything. I knew this was my moment, my chance, to take back control of my life. But the weight of what I was about to do was overwhelming. I confided in Sarah, who had been my rock through all of this. "You've got this," she said, her voice firm. "You've done the work. You've gathered the evidence. Now it's time to show them what you're made of." Her words gave me strength, but I could still feel the doubt creeping in. What if I failed? What if no one believed me? What if Mark found a way to turn this around on me? The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with all the things that could go wrong. But as the first light of dawn crept through the curtains, I felt a strange sense of calm. I had done everything I could. Now it was time to face the music. I dressed carefully that morning, choosing a sharp, professional outfit that would command respect. I wanted to look confident, in control, even if I didn't feel it. As I stood in front of the mirror, I took a deep breath and reminded myself why I was doing this. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice, about holding Mark accountable for everything he had done. The boardroom was already half full when I arrived. The air was thick with tension, the low murmur of conversation filling the room. I could feel the weight of their eyes on me as I walked in, but I kept my head high. I had a job to do, and I wasn't going to let anyone intimidate me. Mark arrived a few minutes later, his usual confident swagger in full force. He didn't even glance at me as he took his, seat at the head of the table, his attention focused on the papers in front of him. Emily followed shortly after, her expression carefully neutral. But I could see the flicker of unease in her eyes as she sat down. I waited until everyone was settled before I began. My heart was pounding, but my voice was steady as I laid out the evidence, piece by damning piece. The room was silent as I spoke, the tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I could see the shock on the board members' faces as they realized the extent of Mark's betrayal. But just as I was about to deliver the final blow, I heard something, a sound that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was the sound of the door opening, and when I turned to see who it was, my heart sank. Standing there, with a look of pure fury on his face, was Mark's lawyer. And he wasn't alone. With everything in place, all that was left was to face him. But just as I walked through the door, I heard something. A sound that stopped me dead in my tracks. The room fell silent as I stood at the front of the boardroom, the weight of everyone's eyes on me. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was it, the moment I had been working toward for weeks. I took a deep breath and began. "Thank you all for being here today," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. I know this is unusual, but what I'm about to share with you is too important to ignore. I paused, letting my words sink in. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one interrupted. I turned to Mark, who was sitting at the head of the table, his expression a mix of confusion and irritation. "Mark," I said, my tone sharp and deliberate, "you've been lying to all of us. For years, you've been stealing from this company, funneling money into offshore accounts, and using my name to cover your tracks." His face went pale, but he quickly recovered, his trademark confidence slipping back into place. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "This is ridiculous. You're just upset because of our personal issues, and now you're trying to drag the company into it." I didn't flinch. Instead, I turned to the projector and clicked the remote. The screen behind me lit up with a series of documents, bank statements, transaction records, and emails, all linking Mark to the embezzlement scheme. The room erupted in murmurs as the board members leaned forward, their eyes scanning the evidence. "This is just the beginning," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Over the past few weeks, I've uncovered a web of lies and deceit that goes far beyond what any of us could have imagined. Mark hasn't just been stealing from the company, he's been using company funds to fund his affair with Emily, his secretary." I turned to Emily, who was sitting at the far end of the table, her face ashen. She opened her mouth to protest, but I cut her off. "Don't bother denying it," I said, holding up a stack of printed text messages. "I have proof of everything. The two of you have been planning this for months, maybe even years, but what you didn't count on was me finding out." Mark stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is insane," he said, his voice rising. "You can't just come in here and make these accusations without proof." "Oh, I have proof," I said, my voice cold and steady. I clicked the remote again, and the screen filled with photos of Emily wearing the diamond necklace Mark had given me, along with receipts for expensive gifts and vacations paid for with company funds. "You've been using this company as your personal piggy bank, and I'm not going to let you get away with it." The room was in chaos now, the board members shouting questions and accusations at Mark. He tried to defend himself, but his words were drowned out by the noise. I stood there, watching as his carefully constructed world began to crumble around him. It was everything I had worked for, everything I had dreamed of, but it didn't feel as satisfying as I had imagined. Instead, I felt a strange sense of emptiness, as if the victory was hollow. But I wasn't done yet. I turned to the board members and said, "There's one more thing you need to know. I own this company. My father left it to me years ago, and I've been running it behind the scenes ever since. Mark was never the CEO. He was just a figurehead, a puppet I used to keep the company running smoothly. But now it's time for the truth to come out." The room fell silent again, the weight of my words sinking in. Mark stared at me, his face a mask of shock and disbelief. "You're lying," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You can't own the company. I'm the CEO." I shook my head. "You were never the CEO, Mark. You were just a pawn in my game. And now the game is over." The board members were quick to act. They called for an emergency vote, and within minutes, Mark was stripped of his title and fired on the spot. He stood there, his face red with anger and humiliation, as security escorted him out of the room. Emily followed shortly after, her head bowed in shame. She didn't say a word as she left, but the look on her face said it all. She knew she had lost. As the room emptied, I sat down at the head of the table, the weight of everything that had happened finally hitting me. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. Instead, I felt a strange sense of loss, as if a part of me had died along with the life I had built with Mark. But just as I thought the moment was over, something happened that I never could have predicted. The door opened, and Mark's lawyer walked in, followed by a man I didn't recognize. They approached the table, their expressions grim. "We need to talk," the lawyer said, his voice cold and businesslike. "There's something you need to know." And just as I thought the moment was over, something happened that I never could have predicted. The truth was worse than I imagined, and it changed everything I thought I knew about the people I trusted. The days following the board meeting were a whirlwind of activity. The company was in chaos, and it was up to me to pick up the pieces. I spent long hours in the office, meeting with department heads, reassuring employees, and working to stabilize the company's finances. It was exhausting, but it was also strangely satisfying. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my life. Mark was gone, and with him went the shadow he had cast over my life. He had been fired, his reputation in ruins, and he had no one to turn to. Emily had quit shortly after the meeting, disappearing without a trace. I heard through the grapevine that she had moved to another city, but I didn't care enough to find out for sure. She was no longer a part of my life, and that was all that mattered. But as much as I tried to focus on the future, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The victory I had worked so hard for felt hollow, as if there was still a piece of the puzzle missing. I tried to push the thought aside, telling myself it was just the stress of everything that had happened. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. I confided in Sarah, who had been my rock through all of this. "You've done an amazing job," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "You took back your life and you saved the company. What more could you want?" I didn't have an answer. On the surface, everything was perfect. I was the CEO of a successful company, I had my freedom, and I had the support of my friends and colleagues. But there was still a nagging feeling. In the back of my mind, a sense that I wasn't done yet. The board members were quick to rally behind me, their initial shock giving way to admiration and respect. They praised my courage and determination, and they were eager to put the scandal behind them. But not everyone was so forgiving. Some of the employees were wary of me, unsure of what my leadership would mean for the company. I couldn't blame them. After everything that had happened, it was natural for them to be cautious. I tried to focus on the positive, on the future I was building for myself and the company. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still something I was missing. It was like a puzzle with a missing piece, a story with an unfinished ending. And then, one evening, as I was going through some old files, I found it, a document I had overlooked, hidden in a folder I hadn't opened in years. It was a contract, signed by Mark and a man I didn't recognize, dated just a few months before my father's death. My heart raced as I read through it, the words on the page sending a chill down my spine. I thought it was over. I thought I had won. But the truth was, there was still one more secret I needed to uncover. One that could change everything once again. As the dust settled and the chaos of the past few weeks began to fade, I found myself standing in the boardroom once again. This time. The room was filled with a sense of hope and determination, a stark contrast to the tension and anger that had defined it just days before. I looked around at the faces of the board members, the employees, and the friends who had stood by me through it all, and I felt a surge of pride. We had come so far, and we had done it together. I took a deep breath and stepped forward, my voice steady and strong. "Thank you all for being here today," I began. "The past few weeks have been some of the most challenging of my life. But they've also been some of the most rewarding. We've faced betrayal, deceit, and heartbreak, but we've also found strength, courage, and justice. And now, it's time to move forward. I paused, letting my words sink in. The room was silent, every eye focused on me. As part of that forward movement, I'm announcing a new company-wide initiative to support women in business. Too often, women are overlooked, underestimated, and undervalued in the workplace. But I'm here to tell you that's going to change. Starting today, we're committing to creating opportunities for women at every level of this company, from entry-level positions to the boardroom. We're going to be a company that values diversity, equality, and fairness, and we're going to lead by example. The room erupted in applause, the sound filling me with a sense of purpose and determination. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about creating a better future for everyone, about making sure no one else had to go through what I had gone through. It was about justice, not just for me, but for all the women who had been silenced, overlooked, and underestimated. As I stood there watching everything I'd fought for unfold, I realized one thing. I didn't just want revenge. I wanted justice. And in the end, I got something far greater than I expected. The weeks that followed were a blur of progress and rebuilding. The company was thriving under my leadership, and the new initiatives I had introduced were already making a difference. Women from all levels of the organization were stepping into leadership roles, their voices finally being heard. It felt like a new chapter, one filled with hope and possibility. But just as I was starting to settle into this new reality, something unexpected happened. I was in my office late one evening, reviewing reports and planning for the upcoming quarter, when my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen, expecting a routine email or a message from Sarah, but what I saw made my heart stop. It was a text from an unknown number, just a few words, but they sent a chill down my spine. "You think you've won, but the game isn't over. Watch your back." I stared at the message, my mind racing. Who could have sent this? Was it Mark trying to intimidate me from wherever he had disappeared to? Or was it someone else, someone I hadn't even considered? I thought about the contract I had found, the one that hinted at a deeper conspiracy. Could this be connected? I didn't have answers, but one thing was clear. This wasn't over. Whoever had sent that message knew something I didn't, and they weren't going to let me move on without a fight. Just when I thought the battle was over, a message appeared on my phone. The game wasn't over yet. It was only just beginning.